This is CNN Breaking News.
We're continuing to follow breaking news. I'm Boris Sanchez. Frederica Whitfield is off. Protests are now unfolding across parts of the country as we take a live look at Washington, D.C., New York City, and Miami. Across the East Coast, protests in response to President Trump's controversial travel ban. These demonstrations have been going on for a little while now. There's actually going to be one in West Palm Beach, not far from Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, where he's spending the weekend. That's later tonight. This all happening as the Department of Homeland Security says it's not going to implement the president's order after it was temporarily halted by a federal judge. Our team of reporters is covering this story from every angle. Let's start with CNN Washington correspondent Ryan Nobles. Ryan, agencies have been told that it's essentially just business as usual.
Yeah, that's right, Boris. And both the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security are operating as if the Trump executive order had never been issued. This in response to that order, the restraining order put in place by the judge in Washington state. This is what the Department of Homeland Security had to say in a statement earlier today about their response to that restraining order. It says, quote, DHS has suspended any and all actions implementing the affected sections of the executive order. This includes actions to suspend passenger system rules that flag travelers for operational action subjected to the executive order. Now, that DHS statement does go on to say that they still believe that the order is necessary and that they will will implement it once again if the court proceedings make their way through. And we should say that the next thing we are looking for is the Department of Justice's response to this restraining order put in place by that judge in Washington state. They could file it in two different places. They could go back to the judge and ask him to reconsider or put an emergency stay on his order, or they could appeal to a higher court, the appeals court in the 9th District. We're not sure exactly what they're going to do. That's what we're waiting to find out. And the Department of Justice has said that they will respond at some point in the very near future. Boris?
All right, Ryan Nobles, thank you. Let's turn to Jessica Schneider now. She's live in West Palm Beach, where Donald Trump is spending the weekend. The White House, I should say, clearly unhappy with that judge's ruling. The president himself firing back at that judge via Twitter this morning, right, Jessica?
That's right, Boris. Donald Trump, President Trump, taking to Twitter in a series of fiery and brash tweets. They started with this one this morning. I'll read it for you. Trump tweeting, when a country is no longer able to say who can and who cannot come in and out, especially for reasons of safety and security, big trouble. That was just the first tweet among many. Donald Trump in his tweets also calling the order of that judge out in Seattle ridiculous. It wasn't the only time that the administration used such an adjective to describe that order. In fact, last night a statement was released by Press Secretary Sean Spicer, initially calling the order outrageous. Then that word outrageous was taken out in a subsequent statement that was released. The White House saying this last night: at the earliest possible time, the Department of Justice intends to file an emergency stay of this order and defend the executive order of the president, which we believe is lawful and appropriate. The president's order is intended to protect the homeland, and he has the constitutional authority and responsibility to protect the American people. The administration remaining steadfast that they believe this executive order signed by President Trump last Friday remains legal. They will fight it. And that's not the only thing happening here in Mar-a-Lago today. We know that protesters right now are gearing up as well in West Palm Beach, just outside of the Trump International Hotel. We expect, by Facebook estimates, a few hundred up to 2,000 people. They'll be marching toward Mar-a-Lago, but because of space and security concerns, they will be kept on the north side of the Intracoastal Waterway, a pretty fair distance away from Mar-a-Lago. So a lot stirring down here in Palm Beach, the Winter White House, the White House itself having to take quick action, releasing that statement last night. And of course, President Trump, as he often does, taking to Twitter this morning, bashing the order itself and also criticizing the judge. Boris?
All right, Jessica, thank you. Let's head over to CNN aviation and government regulation correspondent Renee Marsh. Renee, this has to have been a frantic time for the airlines as they're just trying to work to keep up with all these orders.
You know, I was speaking with one airline official who said what's going to happen. They're waiting to see what will happen next because, of course, this isn't resolved yet. But this morning, we are getting a lot more clarity from the federal government on what this temporary lift of the travel ban means for passengers and airlines in the meantime. Customs and Border Protection told airlines to go ahead and go back to the standard procedures that were in place before President Trump's travel ban. The CBP went even further, telling airlines, quote, it's back to business as usual as far as entry into the United States. They also said it's as if this executive order never existed. Now, airlines, in response, they have taken down the travel alerts that were on their websites, and they're getting the word out to their customers that people with visas that are otherwise valid are free to board U.S.-bound planes. We saw one tweet from an immigration attorney in Chicago who said he witnessed Customs and Border Protection allowing passengers with visas and green cards to board flights. But a reminder to everyone, this is a temporary lift, so we still have a ways to go before this is completely resolved, and airlines know that. They are aware that things could change again due to another court order. I am told that immigration attorneys are telling their clients, go now in case things change again. So if you need to get to the United States, these attorneys are saying this is your chance.
All right, Renee, thank you so much. Coming up, protests erupting across the country right now. We're looking at live pictures of the protests in Washington, D.C. We're going to have more on these demonstrations just ahead. Plus, protests erupting across the nation right now over President Trump's travel ban. You're looking at live pictures of demonstrations in Washington, D.C., New York, and Miami. We're going to continue to follow these protests as they unfold. After a judge issued an order that temporarily reversed the president's travel ban, Trump fired back on Twitter. He tweeted this out, quote, "The opinion of this so-called judge, which essentially takes law enforcement away from our country, is ridiculous and will be overturned." Now, Democrats are firing back, sounding the alarm. Democratic leader Chuck Schumer saying, quote, "The president's attack on Judge James Robart, a Bush appointee who passed with 99 votes, shows a disdain for an independent judiciary that doesn't always bend to his wishes and a continued lack of respect for the Constitution." Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy doubled down in this statement, writing, quote, "The president's hostility toward the rule of law is not just embarrassing, it is dangerous. He seems intent on precipitating a constitutional crisis." Let's talk about all of this with CNN legal analyst Denny Savalos and Time Magazine contributor Jay Newton-Small. Jay, first to you. This isn't the first time that Donald Trump has gone after a judge. Remember, back during the campaign, he attacked Gonzalo Curiel, the judge that presided over the Trump University case, questioning how objective he could be because of his Mexican heritage. In this case, as I just mentioned a moment ago, Judge Robart was unanimously approved by the Senate. He was actually appointed by George W. Bush in 2003. So is it really just that anyone that challenges Trump becomes illegitimate by virtue of the challenge?
Well, Boris, I think that's pretty clear when especially when you see that Trump is his favorite sort of excuse or whenever anything goes wrong is to always call out the refs, whether it's judges in cases that he doesn't particularly like for as you just said, the case with Trump University last summer, or in this case, the travel ban for a federal judge in Washington state. Or if you think about it, every time he doesn't like anything in the press, even this morning he was tweeting at the New York Times saying that, that they have terrible coverage. He tweets all the time about, fake news and what's going on and calling out the press whenever he doesn't like anything. And this is just really his modus operandi. When anything doesn't go his way, he calls on the refs and says, well, it's the refs' fault. It's not my fault. It's not my staff's fault. It's got to be somebody else's fault.
Danny, the White House said the Department of Justice would be filing this stay at the earliest possible time. It's now 11 o'clock on the West Coast, where they're going to allegedly file in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. How do you see their strategy playing out? What are the weak spots here in this decision that you see them targeting?
I think the biggest, if there is a weak spot in this decision, it's that the judge didn't really explain which of the arguments of the plaintiff, the state of Washington, that the judge was persuaded by. It's a short opinion. If you read it, he walks through the standard for granting an injunction, which is pretty well established, nothing dramatic there, and then concludes that plaintiff wins. And most of us are left wondering, yes, but why? And that'll become important when it goes up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, because they're going to review it for an abuse of discretion. They're going to look to see whether they made any legal conclusions or findings of fact. And the less there is on the record, the less the appeals court can base it on. Now, in fairness to this district court judge, his role in determining a TRO, a temporary restraining order, is not to decide the case on the merits. So he had a very good reason for not putting a ton of analysis into his opinion.
Right, but isn't it that he believes it's likely to prevail? So I think he wouldn't it be the case that he thinks this is going to
that there was a substantial likelihood that the plaintiff would prevail. He just didn't say which argument persuaded him in making that finding. So that will be interesting once it goes up on appeal, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judges, whoever they get on the wheel, it's random, start scrutinizing this opinion and asking the questions. What were his findings? What were the facts upon which he based this? And what legal concepts did he apply? And the less he applied, or the less that he found in the lower court opinion, the less there is for the appeals court to review.
Jay, to you, some Republicans openly criticized the rollout of this executive decision, specifically how it was implemented without necessarily tapping into some of the agencies that would be affected by it. How do you see them responding to this legal conundrum moving forward?
Well, it is really interesting because Capitol Hill was clearly very tepid in their support for this travel ban. If they actually wanted to support it, they could pass legislation in support of it, which would actually help cement the travel ban, help bolster it. And you noticeably saw neither chamber of Congress moving towards passing any kind of legislation that would actually support that travel ban. Certainly, this does make the confirmation of Donald Trump's Supreme Court Justice nominee Gorsuch really important to do it as quickly as possible, because if the Ninth Circuit then decides for the plaintiff, and as is expected, then it bounces up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, if it ties 4-4, it's 8 members right now, and that vacancy is still there, it will automatically revert back to the Ninth Court's decision, and that would stand in the Ninth Court's decision. So in that case, it would stand. So if they don't confirm Gorsuch in time, there is a likelihood that the ban would actually that the suspension of the ban would actually stand.
Now, Denny, quickly to you, if this does come back as a 4-4 decision from the Supreme Court, does the Ninth Circuit decision stand? Isn't there another decision that is essentially the exact opposite of this that might stand in the way of that?
That's how we might find ourselves in a constitutional crisis. Ironically, it is splits among the different circuit courts that make a case appealing to the Supreme Court to take on. So if you have two major splits, if, for example, the First Circuit by then has reached a completely opposite conclusion, and other courts and other circuits have reached other different conclusions, and it goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is at a draw, then yes, in theory, those cases go back down and the appellate court holding stands. But it raises the question, and I'm not sure anyone knows what exactly will happen with this particular case if many different circuits are left after going to the Supreme Court in a state of split.
All right, Denny Swallows, Jay Newton-Small, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate you being with us this weekend. Stay with us as we continue to monitor live protests against the Trump administration's immigration policy across the East Coast. We'll be right back.
We begin right now with all the new developments surrounding President Trump's travel ban. The Trump administration pushing back forcefully on Friday's action by a federal judge in Washington state. Let's take you through it. A temporary nationwide restraining order allowing entry into the U.S. by individuals from those 7 Muslim-majority countries listed in the president's executive order. This will remain in effect until that federal judge in Seattle considers the legal challenge. President Trump voiced his frustration with a string of Saturday tweets, as we've come to expect from Mar-a-Lago, starting with this, quote, "When a country is no longer able to say who can and who cannot come in and out, especially for reasons of safety and security, big trouble, exclamation point." Let's bring in NBC's Kelly O'Donnell down in West Palm Beach. Kelly, that tweet I read was the first of many from the president this morning.
There were several of them, and we do expect that there could be a protest near the president's residence today, but that's scheduled for later today. So far, there have not been protesters in the area of Mar-a-Lago based on what we've been able to tell. But the president was using Twitter to try to respond to what happened. The White House last night had officially done a statement, but the president wanted to do more. And he chose to do something that is highly unusual and is really stirring controversy today, Jacob, and that is to address the judge sort of directly, not personally, but directly. And that typically does not happen because the executive branch and the legislative branch are co-equal. And many times there are judgments and rulings that a given president won't be happy with, but they usually don't make it something where the president personally gets entangled. So let me give you the example of what I'm talking about. The president today tweeted the opinion of this so-called judge, which essentially takes law enforcement away from our country, is ridiculous and will be overturned. So to refer to this judge, James Robart, as so-called, to cast, sort of to describe his ruling as ridiculous is perhaps a personal feeling, but one the president usually doesn't express, and then to predict that it will be overturned. So the president really going all in with that tweet to express his displeasure as the Trump administration and the U.S. government is having to react because that judge has had the effect of putting at least a temporary hold on enforcement of the president's travel ban with those 7 countries that are mostly Muslim nations, restricting foreign nationals from coming into the U.S. That is different today because of this ruling. Now, of course, back and forth is expected in the courts. We also saw a bit of the Trump style coming through in the official White House statement last night. At first, the White House press secretary put out a statement. He used the words outrageous with reference to the judge's ruling. And then about 10 minutes later, they reissued the statement and they removed that word. So one can presume that in the intervening 10 minutes, they decided that perhaps it was best to not characterize what had happened in the Seattle-based federal court too soon or with too much sort of emotion behind it. But we do expect that this will continue to be a topic that will force the president to reconsider his ban or to have his administration take a look at what some of the factors are, and will there be sort of the lifting in a practical sense where the visas are restored, where people are able to travel. So it's a complicated set of issues on one of the earliest promises of the presidential campaign from then candidate Donald Trump and one of the earliest actions while he's in office. Jacob?
Yeah, Kelly, the removal of that word outrageous so quickly from the White House statement was certainly curious, and it makes you think about what differing factions there are within the White House that led to that omission, removal, I guess, so quickly. Kelly O'Donnell in West Palm Beach, thank you so very much. Thousands of protesters across the world are gathering in light of President Trump's controversial travel ban, and right now, one of the bigger demonstrations in the United States is happening in our nation's capital. NBC's Tom Costello is in Washington, D.C. right now. Excuse me, Tom, what do you see?
Hey, Jacob, good afternoon. So this has really been growing in size over the course of the past couple of hours. I'm going to ask our photographer to go up on Periscope, if you will, right now, so you can get a sense of how many people are up here, or out here. And, it's hard to tell when you're in the middle of it, Jacob. I'm guessing at this point we've got several thousand. That's just my guesstimate from on the ground. It's not official. And I'm going to ask Brian, turn to your right. That's the White House right through the trees. So, Brian, Jacob, we're literally right in front of the White House. But as you know, President Trump is not here. He is right now down in Florida. But the message from all of these folks is really a dual message. Number one, they don't like the idea of a ban, whether it involves people from specific countries or a Muslim ban, and they don't like the idea of a wall on the southern border. I'm going to bring in one of the people who's here. This is Yasser Amin, is that right?
Yes, that
Why
is.
are you here today?
I just want to spread peace and not spread hate and not to have fear conquer us.
Yasser tells me you are an American citizen. Where's your family from, and what are your thoughts or concerns right now?
My family is originally from Pakistan, but my dad came here back in '85, and we've all been born here and raised here.
Okay, and your thoughts or concerns, if any, about family who may still be overseas?
That, you know what, this is not going to stop us. We're going to be peaceful, and America's great like that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Yasser. That is kind of the sentiment in this crowd. Jacob, there really is no opposition, if you will, in this crowd. In other words, people here who are against the wall, people here who are against any sort of a ban, whether it's in name or not. That's kind of the unified message here. People who support the Trump administration on this issue are not here, at least not at the moment. Back to you.
Tom, I think I can make out over your conversation with Yasser the chant "Stop the Hate." These protests in Washington, D.C. have become a regular occurrence every single weekend since the inauguration. I was out there on Inauguration Day and back here in Los Angeles for the Women's March here in Los Angeles. Tom Costello, thank you so very much in Washington, D.C. People are also gathering at this hour at airports across the country. A lot of confusion. NBC's Katie Beck is about 25 miles away from where I am sitting right now at Los Angeles International Airport. How are things there, Katie?
Well, Jacob, about an hour ago, I would say they were off to a slow start, and that landscape has changed over the past hour. Protesters are now arriving. They're standing at the arrival gate, really eagerly awaiting to make these voices heard again for, as you said, another weekend. Joining me right now is a UCLA professor. Michael, you were here last weekend.
That's right.
Yeah, and you're here again.
Of course.
What is the message that you're trying to get out today?
It's very important that the United States keep up its democratic principles, its basic human values of being welcoming to everybody, and not being bigoted, not being racist, not discriminating on the basis of religion. That's very, very important. That's the fundamental values of our country.
Your sign says you stand with your students. Could you explain what that means a little bit?
So me and a bunch of other colleagues of the UCLA Political Science Department have created a website called We Stand With Our Students. And so it's like a resource for people who've been affected by the ban to go and find faculty allies in all the universities in the United States. So we're looking for other faculty who are interested in helping out to join up and volunteer for this effort.
And obviously you're aware of the ruling that came down in Washington yesterday. Is that encouraging to you? Are you hoping that stays around?
Of course, yeah. It's very important that the process go forward. And again, this is part of what it means to be in a democracy, is that we have three equal parts of government and the judiciary needs to speak.
Okay. All right, well, we're going to be standing by here at LAX throughout the day as these crowds will likely continue to grow. We've also been talking to immigration lawyers that are standing at the arrival gate. They are waiting to give anyone who comes through legal advice, free counsel, just helping them transition if they should need it. There's also been volunteers dropping off food and water in case anyone is detained for long periods of time and need those resources as well. So as I said, this rally is expected to start in the next 2 hours. We are seeing protesters start to arrive now. We're going to continue to bring you the latest on that. Jacob?
All right, Katie, thanks. In the last couple of weeks being any indication, we expect, I would imagine, quite a bit of folks out at Los Angeles International Airport. Now back across the country to New York City, more than 100 gathered for a communal prayer demonstration outside the JFK terminal in New York City last night. A 91-year-old Holocaust survivor was among those speaking at the event. MSNBC's Adam Reese is there for us now. Hey, Adam, what's the scene like out there today?
Good afternoon, Jacob. Immigration attorneys who've been camped out here for about 9 days are really encouraged by Judge Robart's decision to put a stop to the president's executive order. Customs officials here say that they're moving forward business as usual, as if that executive order had never even been put in place. As you mentioned earlier in the show, Jacob, the president tweeting again this morning, Judge Robart calling him a so-called judge who made a ridiculous decision, something that the president will seek to overturn very soon. Joining me now, Camille Mackler. She is an immigration attorney who is here at Kennedy Airport. You are making every effort you can to find out, make sure that these people who were detained overseas before can now come into the United States. You've been in touch with airlines. What are they telling you?
Yes, most airlines are cooperating and saying that they will allow those with valid visas, now non-canceled visas, to return or to come to the United States. But we are still having trouble with some airlines. Just a few minutes ago, I actually just heard a message that Moroccan Airline was refusing to board a Moroccan national, of all places, to return to JFK Airport. So we're about to try figuring that out. And you're also speaking to people overseas, and there is some good news. We understand one person who had been detained has just landed in Boston. Yes, we just got confirmation that a student visa holder landed, flew in from Tehran, landed in Boston about an hour ago. So
And what are you hearing from people who are detained overseas, who are trying to get here today, yesterday, tomorrow?
So we've been going through our list. So, you know, people have been calling our hotline, and we're going back and trying to get back in touch with people. And we're hearing most airlines are being very accommodating, waiving rebooking fees, that sort of stuff. But some airlines are still giving us a bit of the runaround. Some airlines aren't taking our calls, or they're saying they're waiting for further guidance. And we are particularly concerned with those who actually did come to the U.S. and were turned around during the week, who have canceled visas, stamped on their visas that we're not quite clear on. We're being told that they have to reapply for visas, which is a time-consuming and expensive process.
All right, thank you, Camille. So, Jacob, just like a week ago, still some confusion as they try to get back online here at Kennedy Airport. And Egypt Air officials saying anybody with a valid visa, will not be stopped.
Adam, thanks to you and to Camille for the latest from JFK Airport. Appreciate it. And our coverage of the protests around the nation continues, including in New York City, where the LGBT Solidarity Rally has just kicked off at the historic Stonewall Inn downtown. We are